Welcome to today's EACC webinar, Expanding into the United States, IRA or ERA, Chips, Challenges and Opportunities. Today's program is organized by the European American Chamber of Commerce, Florida, and hosted by Kaufman Rawson. My name is Christina Slezinska. I am the Executive Director of the EACC Florida, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's program. Before we start, a few housekeeping issues. This program is being recorded and intended for informational purposes only. The recording will be posted to the EACC YouTube channel and circulated to attendees of this program. Nothing should be construed or taken as legal or other type of advice, and any information, questions, discussion should not relate to any client matter or issue that may be considered privileged or confidential. All comments presented by our speakers are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of the EACC or of their members. Many thanks to those of you who submitted questions during registration. Additional questions should be submitted in the Q&A box to be answered during the program. The Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act have been designed to increase investments into infrastructure, energy projects, semiconductor manufacturing, and supply chains in the US through federal grants, tax credits, and other incentives. Today's program has been specifically designed to explain what the status is and what opportunities exist for companies from Europe considering expanding their activities to the United States in general and Florida in particular. To address this, we have put together an outstanding panel of experts, which I will briefly introduce. Ella Eskenazi is the head of sustainable finance and clean energy at Bank of the West BMO Harris Commercial Bank. She is responsible for the strategy and execution of sustainable finance activities and solutions across the bank. Mila Kazulke is a partner at law firm Squire Patton Boggs. She provides advice on a wide range of trade policy, legal and regulatory issues and investment programs, including implementation of the CHIPS Act and semiconductor incentives, as well as clean energy provisions of the IRA. Joe Kulenovic is Vice President, International Operations and FDA Program Lead at Enterprise Florida. He manages Florida's network of trade and investment promotion offices abroad and leads efforts to attract foreign direct investment into the state. Michelle Sadeghi is manager in the tax credits and incentives practice within the Tax Services Advisory Group of Kaufman Rawson. As a mechanical engineer with a background in energy efficiency in commercial buildings, she helps clients qualify for various energy credits and incentives for commercial residential buildings. Peter Stratos is a principal at Kaufman Rawson's International Tax Department, where he provides extensive knowledge to his clients on international tax planning for individuals and corporations. Peter is also a member of the board of directors of EACC Florida, and he will be our moderator for the day. And now, without further ado, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. Appreciate it. And thank you to all the panelists for joining and all the attendees. Thank you for taking time out of your morning or afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are. Today, we're going to talk about a topic which I think is drawing a lot of interest, and we're all sort of waiting a little bit to see how funds are going to be spent in these two areas. And hopefully we'll get some good insight today on those topics. And as we go along, you can submit any questions that you have through the chat function, and at the end we'll have some time to try to address some of those. And if we don't have time to address them on this presentation, then we will certainly respond and get back to you as we can after the webinar. So to start off with, we're going to talk about the IRA or IRA. I guess it depends on also where you are, how you say that. It is an act designed to incentivize both businesses and individuals to engage in clean energy in different sectors. And the act has actually 22 different credits broken down into 4 major areas: electricity, transportation, commercial and residential building, and the industrial sector. And we're going to start off with Michelle talking about the building and residential building. And Michelle, what is the impact the IRA is expected to have on the building environment?
Great, thanks, Peter. I'm just going to go ahead and share a few slides with you to help answer that question. So the Inflation Reduction Act is a $370 billion climate investment. It's the largest one in history, and it's anticipated to reduce the greenhouse gases by around 40% by the year 2030. And that's compared to the 2005 levels. And just to give you an idea of what that means, if, without the Inflation Reduction Act, we were expecting to be at about 10 to 15% in reduction of greenhouse gases by 2030. So that's quite the jump that we're going to get from this climate investment. So how is that $370 billion allocated? Peter touched on this briefly, but as you can see here, the largest chunk is going to alternative energy. Next biggest bucket will be manufacturing at nearly $67 billion. And then the area that I'll be focusing on is going to be on the built environment. So around $48 billion going into buildings, both residential and commercial buildings. Most of this money is going into the form of tax credits, as well as different rebates and deductions that are available to both individual residential homeowners as well as commercial developers. Then you can see the next one is going to be transportation, followed by land resilience and agriculture. So why the emphasis on buildings? Well, the built environment is responsible for around 39% of carbon CO2 emissions. So I think this might come as an unexpected fact to many, but it actually is responsible for more of the greenhouse gas emissions than transportation and industry as individual end uses. By 2040, 2/3 of the global building stock will be buildings that exist today. So the Inflation Reduction Act recognized this and took the opportunity to encourage energy efficiency in the built environment, so that by 2040, all the buildings that are in existence will have some of these energy efficient features. And then lastly, another statistic I love to share because I think it's quite staggering, but the global building square footage is expected to double by the year 2060. So think about all the buildings that exist today. By 2060, that is expected to be double. One of the deductions that's been around for around a decade, but was actually enhanced by the Inflation Reduction Act, is the 179D energy efficient commercial building tax deduction. And what this deduction does is it provides a incentive for developers of buildings at anywhere from 50 cents to $5 a square foot for investing in energy efficient technology in the building. This is an incentive that's available to not only commercial developers for tax liable properties, but it's also available to architects and designers of tax exempt buildings. So any architects or designers out there that are working on government buildings, schools, hospitals, nonprofits, and that was actually one of the enhancements of the IRA is they expanded it. It used to just be for government owned buildings, and they've expanded it to include nonprofits and other tax exempt properties. In addition to the 179D deduction, there's also residential incentives out there as well. There's the 45L energy efficient home tax credit that's available for home builders that are either going after an Energy Star certification or a zero energy ready home. And then beyond, commercial development, there's also lots of rebates and credits out there available for individual homeowners. The home energy efficient rebate that gives you a certain amount of money per year for including insulation on your building, upgrading your insulation, upgrading your HVAC equipment, etc. And those are just some high-level items that touch energy efficiency in the built environment from the IRA. And I think I'm going to go ahead and hand it back off to Peter.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So we talked a little bit about the building sector. Outside of real estate, who else can benefit maybe from the act?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, I think designers. So, if we have any designers out there that are working on tax exempt properties, they can benefit from this. Individual homeowners are also able to benefit from this. And yeah, I think those are the two larger buckets that are going to be outside of commercial developers.
Okay, and then I think for folks that are maybe integrating in addition to the professionals, but integrating into the building infrastructure somehow, for example, electric vehicle chargers. So in that case, would the building owner benefit, or would the company who installs it, or the manufacturer, or is there like a supply chain type of incentive there?
Yeah, so I think on the supply chain, I'll leave that for a little bit further into the discussion today. But in terms of the commercial developers, that there are incentives for adding infrastructure for electric vehicle charging stations. So depending on your jurisdiction and where you live here, there are code requirements that are now beefing up and requiring you to install a certain number of EV stations or electric vehicle stations. And the IRA is offering incentives to help supplement the cost of developers that are installing that infrastructure.
Okay. So somebody's got to come up with the financing for this and the money, and I think Ella can help shed some light on that and what she's seeing in the market. So Ella, maybe you want to give us a little bit of a background on BMO and where you guys are today in the market and what you're seeing in this space.
Thank you, Peter. I actually would like to take some time to describe our franchise a little bit. Thanks for including us in this critical dialogue. Hoping that I'll be able to share the insights and everything we are gearing up to do. So just to level set, you're seeing some information about BMO Financial Group. We are one of the largest financial institutions in North America. As in any large bank, we offer a range of services to corporates. We have commercial banking arm, which I am part of, and head around sustainable finance. And we do have also retail and wealth management banking. As you would have guessed, that we are also very active in the space, especially in the clean energy space. We have built a team focused on sustainable finance and energy transition in the past 3 years. We bring a lot of human capital, meaning our bankers and product teams are equipped to really engage with clients about sustainability topics, sustainable finance, where it makes sense for our clients or portfolio companies to leverage the existing vehicles in the market and take advantage of. And if I may, just also from we are talking about IRA, but we have been engaging in the sector for long enough. We have also awesome coverage through our capital markets team in different industries, power utilities, respective energy banking team. So I think just to level set, I think the IRA is really a huge policy lever for those of us who have been working in the sector. It is almost a dream come true, because when you think about these technologies in the that's needed to really decarbonize globally different sectors. In fact, the Biden administration has signed up, to reduce reductions, as Michelle was alluding, by 50 to 52%. So we are really talking about at a global scale, $3 to $5 trillion, right? That needs to hit to be financed globally, and most of this investments will come from developed countries, like from US or North America, Canada, Europe especially. So that's, we also have this obligation to really accelerate the deployment of these technologies. And, the renewables has grown significantly even before IRA. I would say last 4 or 5 years, double-digit growth, between 15 to 25%, annually. If again against so many headwinds, right? We had COVID, we had supply chain issues. We had a lot of disruption in the market, but now really the real context for this is how does North America, US play a leading role in terms of bringing more investments, right, to accelerate the deployment, the replacement of fossil fuels in the energy sector. And we are seeing a lot of activity, as I said, with our specialty groups, or also within our clean energy vertical, we are seeing a lot of traction. We are working with a lot of multinational companies coming to US, building and opening new manufacturing facilities. Again, there is a fantastic report. I would encourage all the participants to take a look by American Clean Power Association. The numbers are really eye-opening. Since the bill has passed in the past 1 year, there has been almost close to 271 billion domestic clean energy investments have been announced. It's just in 1 year. And if you think about this number is huge. And this is almost worth of eight years of clean energy investments in the US. Okay, so and IRA, when it first came, it was forecasted to bring about $400 billion, but it wasn't capped. So I think we're going to see a lot bigger impact numbers as we move into 2024, 2025. So that 8 years worth of clean energy investments, we're talking about almost 83 new manufacturing facilities in the US. And these are mostly battery solutions, solar and wind, and most of them is really solar manufacturing related. Again, we are talking with these companies in terms of financing their either equity or debt structures. And if you think about it, it's not just that one manufacturing facility. And when that such a investment is planned, it also is planned for infrastructure growth, economic development. Think about all the new siding, new kind of services that in the area that needs to be built, even just basic infrastructure. And think about the supply chain that it's going to bring, all the other small, medium-sized businesses it's going to bring. So there's really huge growth opportunity in terms of jobs. And so highly recommend that we all take a look at that report. But as I said, these things, it's not just rosy picture. I also would like to highlight some of the challenges. Those challenges are, especially given the last year or so, rising, rate in environment, right? These are hard, most of these are, high cost capital items, manufacturing facilities. And there's some additional details, guidance needed to fully capitalize on all the tax credits. For example, investment tax credits, right? We're talking about production tax credit. There are a lot of additional value-added tax credits, adders on top. So I think there is some additional guidance required. There are a lot of discussions to being vetted out for the projects being built. Also the other hurdle challenge in making all these come true is some of the just bottlenecks in the energy system, the transmission, not being robust enough to fully leverage all these investments in a more efficient way. There's permitting issues, we are constantly talking about. But all in all, it's really an awesome enabler for increasing the investments in the U.S., bringing all these social impact, factors and jobs, what have you. So maybe that's what I wanted to cover. Peter, we're very active in the markets. We do have teams covering the key technology companies, and we talk about energy, but the same thing is true for the electrification. Transport sector is also very much going through a lot of changes, new OEMs, new infrastructure build, new power, that electrification that needs to accompany that new transition in the transport infrastructure. We are actively engaging and finding ways to help or bring solutions either directly to those OEMs or working with companies, just like Michelle was mentioning. It can be a municipality looking at transitioning their fleet. It can be again, a company looking to switch to renewable power, looking at solar rooftop solution, right? With all these added incentives, really it's making everything more affordable, more profitable. So we are actively engaged in providing help and support in financing.
Great, thank you, Ella. We had a question come in, and I think it's a great question. Most European companies, and I would suggest American companies as well, are struggling to identify the credits and incentives and how to benefit from them. I think, as I mentioned early on, there are 22 different credits, and a lot of the money, as Mila will talk in a little bit on the CHIPS Act, a lot of the money hasn't really been dispersed yet. And so some of the regulations and other areas of just sort of guidance have yet to be published. So folks in Europe, you are not alone in your frustration. I think there's a great number of people who are like the folks on this panel and others who are trying to figure out how to best do that. But I think we'll continue to track. Christina, you can probably stop sharing the screen here. We'll continue to track the legislation and the guidance, and certainly reach out to any of us on this panel, and we'll help guide you in the right direction. So sort of with that segue, Mila, let's talk a little bit about the CHIPS Act, and from a legislative perspective, where do you see things today, and where do you think they're going?
Morning, everybody. I'm just quickly popping up a slide about CHIPS Act. Also happy to talk legislatively about the IRA too. Just in answering your question, Peter, we are working with companies pretty much daily. They'll come to us. We'll have a sit down. We'll understand what they're doing. We'll sit down with our policy team, which I'm a part of, our tax team, financial services team, and we'll sort of figure out what works and where it fits. And there's a couple mechanisms where a couple might fit, and so we'll sort of figure out what's strategically best. So happy to talk about the IRA too, but on CHIPS and IRA are both sort of two of the three biggest legislative actions under the Biden administration that he and his senior officials will say that, like, this is his economic legacy, right? These are the things that when he's campaigning next year, presumably, these are the things that he's going to be campaigning on as wins. And the CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 was actually really just a funding mechanism. The CHIPS bill had actually been authorized. All these programs have to be both authorized and funded. And it was authorized a couple of years ago, but there was no funding appropriated. So when the CHIPS and Science Act passed in 2022, it was supposed to be part of this huge bill called USICA, United States Investment and Competition Act. I can't remember now. Another one of what would have been sort of a signature bill. But there was so much politics mired up in this bill that in the end, they just pulled out the funding piece and they moved a couple, non-controversial policy provisions with it. But the funding for CHIPS was supposed to be sort of the anchor to move something much bigger. And so for those of you who may have been tracking USICA, there's still a lot of things that are floating out there, particularly in the foreign policy and trade spaces, that just could not move. So once the funding was launched, I mean, we had been talking to Commerce all through that window once the program was authorized but not funded, and Commerce officials would tell you, we can't do anything until we have the money. We're ready to go. We're writing plans. We're drawing up our staffing, but we cannot staff these offices. We can't formally move anything till we have the money. But it was their intention to hit the ground running as soon as they had the money, and they did. So once the CHIPS and Science Act passed, it made some changes to the authorizing language. I don't want to minimize that because it certainly created sort of new structures related to what CHIPS would be, but it was revising this past law, and then we gave us the money, and so it was great. And so unfortunately at that point, it didn't mean, okay, day one, here's your first grant. The revised CHIPS Act really set up new parameters for the structure of the office that would run it. It made a bit more complex the regulations that would need to be issued as well. So even if Commerce had the regulations sort of ready, they knew that until the CHIPS and Science Act was enacted, formally passed into law, they did not have Congress's at least final at that moment word. So that's what we've sort of seen since then. We've seen the office staff up substantially with, I think, 100 to 200 people, I think the last I'd heard. And the people working in this office are not just bureaucrats, but these are people with experience and expertise in the financial sector and in the technology. Because, officials running the office will tell you this is not a simple grant program. There is a lot of complexity. The Department of Commerce has a lot of subject matter experts that whose job it is to understand U.S. capabilities in a wider range of industries, including semiconductors. That's why you've seen a lot of these sort of over the years supply chain evaluations come out of the agency. But they have a lot of people there that are really more like Wall Street people. So that's just sort of to tell you that these CHIPS funds are not the same as any other grant program. We've been advising clients that are applying for the funds that you don't just submit an application and get a check back. Part of what is negotiated as part of these applications is frankly an agreement, like a business deal, that you as a company are not going to do XYZ, or that you are going to do XYZ along a certain timeline. And your ability to secure funds along the way is contingent on meeting those benchmarks. So at the end of the day, people are not just walking out with a check, but they are walking out with basically a contract. And so we've been telling our clients, you want your M&A team next to you because you want to know what you're committing to, not just along the timeline of the construction of the facility, but the CHIPS and Science Act contains some what are called guardrails, but restrictions on the types and the degree of investments that can be made in China and with Chinese entities for the foreseeable future. So this is not like we're really, a lot of our clients are looking at this, okay, I need a grant writing team, but I also need my legal team, I need my financial team. And I can't underscore enough how much the financial team is important too, because part of your conditions in getting the funding is opening your books and showing them how this plant would be viable. It's showing them that you have financial incentives from your local and state government. And all of that's written into the law. And so it's really a complex situation. Now, I think hopefully you can see I've projected a slide that shows you some of the key dates that have happened when it comes to implementing the program. No money has gone out yet. And as in all things, none of this is going on in a vacuum. I'll talk a little bit at the end about the shutdown, but the shutdown will probably slow things down even further. But so far, we have two sort of buckets of money that are open that are for larger programs. And so for a lot of you on the call who are thinking about these kinds of investments, you might think, oh, these are sort of too big. Some of them are for the the large scale commercial facilities. So think the TSMCs and the Intels announcing their facilities around the country. The second was the materials manufacturers, which was a really heavy push from the industry, was to make sure that materials were eligible as well, but for projects over 300 million. A lot of our clients are actually waiting for the third bucket, which is going to be a separate, streamlined process for projects under 300 million. This streamlining is very important, I think, because having read the 80-page notice for a funding opportunity, or NOFO, it's a really complicated process that involves opening your books and committing to workforce development and all those things. So this separate product, I think, is actually going to be really important. But in all of these, there is a preference being given to consortia, cooperating, finding smaller entities on the supply chain. So just because you might be a smaller company and you might not need, a whole project, you really want to think about talking to anyone, your team in Washington, or to your, your folks that handle government relations, going to Commerce and telling them, hey, I make Y, and I want to help someone, and they have mechanisms, my understanding from talking to them, to put you in touch and to help consortiums come together. So that's really exciting. All of this is in addition to, but separate from, a new manufacturing tax credit. And from the beginning, for lawmakers, it was very important that and the industry, which was very active in Washington, to have both the incentive program and the tax credit. And so that's all built into this as well. The first sort of the draft regulations related to the tax credit came out earlier this year. They have not been, the final regulations have not been released yet. So we're waiting for those regulations. We did get the final guardrails, so the final description of the restrictions on doing business with China and in what conditions. Those just came out at the end of last week. So what are we waiting for now? We're waiting for the money. The money's not out. All of these big projects, applications are going in on a rolling basis, but no money has gone out yet. And they'll tell you it's just things are more complicated, and it's true. The final guardrails documents just came out on Friday, but again, administration officials will tell you that this is a negotiating process, just like a business deal. And so even though the guardrails restrictions just came out, they've been working on applications. But what will complicate this and might complicate the IRA, various IRA credits, is the fact that we might be staring down a government shutdown in the next 4 or 5 days. I think a week ago, I might have told you we were optimistic. Speaker McCarthy had a lot of, maneuvers and things he was going to try. I think especially this week, there's a lot more concern that he does not have any sort of great options. And so again, I would keep watching. Technically, the shutdown would not occur until after Saturday, after September 30th. Sometimes Congress can pull things out really quickly and pass a spending bill over the weekend. No one ever knows the government was shut down on a Sunday. But Commerce official Secretary Raimondo has warned that the CHIPS office will slow down. Other parts of Commerce will slow down. I will caution that at least at Treasury, well, not caution, but give you good news, many different components of Treasury are actually funded. The IRS is actually funded through 2031. So, and they're heavily involved with Treasury, but also the Department of Energy in putting together the regulations for a wide range of these energy bills, energy provisions we're talking about. So that's sort of broad based on CHIPS. I'm happy to answer questions at the end about where the shutdown's going, what all these things, what Washington means for IRA and CHIPS overall.
Great, thank you, Mila. That was going to be one of the questions. What happens I think I was listening to somebody speak earlier or late last week, not if the government shuts down, but what's going to happen when they do shut down. I think it's kind of the consensus. So it's good to hear the IRS. I guess some people don't like the fact that the IRS is still funded, but I think for those of us in the industry, we love that we don't like it when the IRS can't do their job, because it makes our job that much harder.
I think that was actually in the Inflation Reduction Act, was the funding.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right. So I think both for you, Mila, and Michelle, we talked a little bit about the credit, some certification processes, some application processes. And it's particularly in the chips and in these proposed regulations, there were there's some rules surrounding vesting over a 5-year period, the benefits, and there's a clawback if you engage in certain behavior within like 10 years or dispose of activity. If you don't sort of meet all of those qualifications, whether in the IRA or the CHIPS Act, what kind of clawbacks does the government have available? You know, how might those credits need to be recaptured? Is it just through like a tax return, or would you have to write a check? Maybe are there different mechanisms in different situations?
I can tell you for chips, the clawback provisions will likely be written out as part of the negotiations in the agreement that's finalized between Commerce and the company. And you're correct, the clawback is 100% part of it, and part of it has to do with the guardrails that were finalized on Friday relating to contracting with Chinese entities. I mean, for those companies that already have contracts, there are some conditions that were in the guardrails on Friday that had to do with existing relationships, but those have to be disclosed at the time of the contracting. And they're going to be benchmarks on the timeline. And so this is not going to be, thank you, here's your check, good luck building your facility. There's, they've built up a very large team and they're expecting to do a significant amount of oversight. And the clawback provision on I think they're calling it the technology clawback related to contracting with Chinese companies, not just companies that are building in China, but companies that are contracting with Chinese entities. I believe that was even written into the law.
Yeah.
So really, a lot of this too is, Commerce is writing the regulations, but they don't have flexibility on the directive itself. It's just a matter of how are they interpreting it and how are they applying it.
Right. I think the language is something about China and or other foreign country of concern. Yeah.
Foreign country of concern. Sorry, foreign entity of concern is it's part of the 30D.
Yeah. So I think most of us can guess that's China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, that the folks that are on that list usually.
Yeah, Congress has gotten very creative. There's one law related to critical minerals that's existed for a long time that lists those 5 countries. So rather than list them out, they just constantly reference this one random statute.
All right. Michelle, anything on the building sector in terms of clawbacks or maybe having to repay anything back if you don't follow the guidelines?
No, nothing along those lines. Some of these deductions, you have to make sure you're going to be a long-term holder of the building, and long-term is a subjective term. You don't want, we're not developers that are building up their asset and then flipping it within a year. There's a recapture on these deductions that have to be paid. So it doesn't make a lot of sense in those instances, but as long as you're holding on to the building for 3 to 5 years and longer, we start to see it make a lot of sense. And then in terms of, on the residential and on the individual level, definitely not. I think it's the opposite. It's once you make the investment and you get a rebate, in your energy efficiency, you're just going to continue to reap the benefits through lower utility bills down the line.
Yes, thank you. And I think I heard you speak in another session, and there's some rule changes on the residential side, right, in terms of certification this year versus next year.
Yeah, so the 45L energy efficient home tax credit, it originally had certain requirements surrounding the features of the building and the different testing, but now from 2023 and beyond, the residential units now have to either get the Energy Star multifamily new construction certification or a Zero Energy Ready Homes certification. So those are the 2 changes that came about from the IRA. They are a little bit more stringent. The amount of money on the table has gone up, but in order to qualify, they're asking that you do more. Whereas 179D is still catching up. It's referencing a building code that, for the state of Florida, for instance, is about 3 building codes behind, meaning that most buildings built to the current code in the state of Florida are going to be close to qualifying. Obviously, there's exceptions. There's projects that have unique circumstances, but And the 179D deduction is meant to be updated in 2027. So I think between now and 2027, it's a unique period for developers that are already building to the current codes to try and take advantage of this deduction that's on the table.
Great, thank you. And I think, as Mila mentioned in her discussion, it is really important that everybody bring their advisors to the table, the legal advisors, the financial advisors, both from a tax and accounting and a banking for folks like Ella at BMO. It's important to have, not everybody needs to be in every conversation per se, but you do need to keep, each of your advisors in the loop, because there's a lot of moving parts, and you just want to make sure you're getting the right amount of input from the right parties. And I think in addition to the experts there, the states are also enacting, whether it's an incentive or just assistance programs, or each state is operating a little bit differently, but they're trying to take advantage of this too. And I think Florida is no exception. We all like Florida. Florida's a great place to be. I moved down there a few years ago, and after going there in the wintertime and realizing why people there in the winter, it's absolutely beautiful. So, with that, Joe, tell us a little bit about what people can expect in or from Florida.
Thank you very much, Peter. So as Christina pointed out earlier, so I work at the Trade and Investment Promotion Organization for Florida, meaning that we do essentially two things. We help Florida companies to export to markets outside the United States, and then we assist companies from other countries interested in establishing or expanding in the state of Florida. We are presently in the process of rebranding ourselves into Select Florida, which will, of course, align better with the national Select USA brand, with which many of our European partners may be already aware. I will, excuse me for a second, I will share my screen to talk a little bit about the, can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so so I will talk a little bit about the magnitude and importance of European investment in Florida, because Florida has historically been one of the top destinations for European companies interested in establishing a presence or growing their presence in the United States. So for us, something like 2/3 of the global total of investment actually originates in European countries. It is, as you would expect, all of the big European economies, whether they be in the European Union, like France and Germany and Italy, or outside the EU, such as the United Kingdom and Switzerland. So collectively, these companies have holdings of close to $70 billion US, and they operate at about 2,000 individual locations, employing close to 250,000 of our workers. So this is a very important and dynamic part of our economy. And we are understandably focused on facilitating the further growth of the European investment that we have in our state. Some reasons why European companies decide to grow, to locate here include, obviously, market access, meaning both to the United States, the large US market, and the local Florida market, which is huge, $1.5 trillion US in size, as well as the neighboring countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, which again collectively have close to 600 million people. So market access is a key factor for why European firms decide to locate here. Also, the ability to tap into cutting-edge technical talent of people with very advanced technical and business skills that are really on a par with the best that you will find elsewhere in the United States. Obviously, geography works in our favor, so we're exceptionally well connected to Europe with a multitude of direct flights, more flights to Latin America and the Caribbean than the rest of the United States combined. We are at the place where the fiber optic undersea cables converge with the terrestrial cables. So we have internet switching stations and lightning fast.
Joe, can I
Yeah.
Sorry, Joe. Were you trying to share your screen, or are you just reading from the slides?
Is my screen visible?
No.
Oh, I am sorry. Is it visible now?
No.
Okay. How about now?
No.
It isn't visible. Okay. How about now?
There we go.
Okay, apologies for that. I thought all the while that you were able to view what was on my screen. So
no worries. I couldn't tell if you were just gonna.
Yes, and we will make these materials available in case anyone actually needs to know any of the numbers. And we're not really bombarding you with statistics, but just kind of giving you a flavor of what we have going on here. So anyway, I will talk a little bit about the the semiconductor industry in Florida. We have had a long tradition of involvement in semiconductors, even in fact, as early as the 1990s, Central Florida was home to a massive semiconductor manufacturing facility, which was a joint venture between Cirrus Logic and Lucent Technologies. It was called Cirrus Semiconductor. At one point, powering something like half the world's mobile phones, basic as they were back in the pre-iPhone era. But so nowadays, Florida is cognizant of the shifting winds in the global economy and the move of supply chains closer to home in terms of the US market. So we are obviously very determined to be a big part of that success story. The state of Florida has therefore invested literally hundreds of millions of US dollars in building up the enabling infrastructure, the talent pool, and the preconditions that are required for the growth and success of the chip industry in our state. This builds on the broader ICT industry, which, as I hope you can now see on the screen, employs close to 500,000 people in our state. So it is really, technology is a massive part of the Florida economic success story. So we have multiple centers of excellence in the state that are relevant to the semiconductor industry. A couple of examples. So the Florida Semiconductor Institute at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And then, of course, Neo City, which is located just south of Orlando. I was fortunate to be able to visit Neo City very recently, so it's very fresh in my mind. It is essentially really a whole city that is growing up on what used to be cow pastures only a decade ago. Now they are, the Belgian outfit, IMEC, and the Korea Institutes for the Advancement of Technology, Tokyo Electron, and many others. So companies from all over the world have a presence there. They are developing and testing the next generation of semiconductor technologies, the 200 millimeter chips, the artificial intelligence chips related to AI computing, and much, much more. And I was really very impressed to, it's one thing to talk about this thing, it's another to actually go and look at the clean rooms and the cutting edge work that is being done there. So the takeaway here is that Florida is really committed to being a leader in semiconductors. We are keen to do what is necessary to enable the growth and success of companies that decide to locate here, whether they be US firms or whether they be companies from other continents. In this case, of course, our focus is on Europe. So what are some of the things that we can do for companies that are sitting now in France or Germany or Sweden and looking at locating in the United States and seriously considering Florida? So obviously we provide a wealth of information on Florida and its economy, the detailed workforce that you may need for these kinds of functions. We also have a variety of workforce development programs, by the way, including customized worker training programs, which can be developed at no cost to the company. I can talk about that separately, but it's a very important consideration when making your site selection. Obviously, introductions to local partner entities in all of 67 counties in Florida, wherever a company may be interested in locating, providing assistance with all the site selection preparations, including environmental permits and regulatory compliance and many other things that matter. We do maintain listings of professional service providers. You've heard some of our colleagues on today's panel who are professional service providers themselves. If a company really needs a law firm that specializes in intellectual property protection and their staff speak French, we can do that. Or employment law specialists who speak Portuguese and that kind of thing. So we maintain listings of these specialists, and we're able to provide referrals to those law firms, accountants, and others that are key enablers of all this activity to happen. And then we also do play a prominent role in connecting, for example, technology incubators, accelerators, universities, other similar entities in other countries with counterparts in Florida if they're looking for soft landing programs, places where companies can locate where they would have a supportive ecosystem. We definitely have the ability to make those introductions as well. And finally, I have to mention the network of offices that we maintain in Europe. So right now, I hope you can see on the screen, we have several locations in all the key European markets. We have excellent coverage of all those key countries in Europe, and oftentimes they cover adjacent markets as well. For example, the Madrid office covers nearby Portugal. So I encourage everyone to visit our website, where you have the detailed contact information for our European offices, who should always be your first point of contact if you are interested in Florida, because they are native speakers of the home language and can provide you with a wealth of information long before you ever visit Florida. That way, when you do come on a site visit to our state, we can ensure that you have a much more productive visit. So I will stop there. Thank you, Peter, and everyone.
Thanks, Joe. And on the link that you had on that last slide where it was referencing Enterprise Florida, I imagine that will redirect you to the new link once the rebranding is completed?
That's exactly right. So enterpriseflorida.com will become selectflorida.org, but all the links will automatically redirect. So no need to worry about which landing page you will.
Awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. I think reaching out to the offices, the local offices in your home country, if you're in Europe, is a really good idea, not only because of the language, but because they're in your time zone, and it's just a little bit easier to work, and then they can connect you. And then each of the counties in Florida, which obviously there's way too many to represent here on this panel today, but there are economic development authorities also in various counties. For example, in Miami-Dade, there's the Beacon Council. In the Broward County, there's the Greater Fort Lauderdale Alliance, and each of those counties also have economic development authorities and can work with Select Florida sort of in partnership to help you find a good location for your facility, and also connect with professionals and figure out what programs or incentives might be specific, whether it's real estate if you want to open an office or construct a building, or whether it's an R&D type of a facility, and there are incentives there.
And crucially, help you find the people to staff those facilities, people with the know-how.
That's right. Yep. Labor everywhere I know is tight, so that is a really important piece of the puzzle is finding the workforce. One, I guess, item I'll mention, considering folks are coming into the U.S. From outside of the U.S. is looking at your structuring. If you're already here, you probably already talked to your legal or tax advisors about how to enter the U.S. But it is important, you know, in the U.S. we have, similar to other countries, you have a corporation and you have partnerships, and partnerships are flow-through entities, and they're not taxpayers. The partners in the partnership are the taxpayers. So when you're looking at this and you're thinking about the credits and the incentives and who's going to benefit, you really want to make sure you model that out, because if you are operating in a flow-through form, which may be the right answer for you, you just have to be aware of who the taxpayer is going to be and where that benefit is going to exist. And if you don't plan that out or map that out, you may end up with a benefit that or a credit that goes nowhere, or doesn't really provide any economic benefit to the organization. So it is crucial that before you get too far down the road, engage with a lawyer, engage with a tax advisor, a financial advisor, and make sure that you understand exactly where that credit is gonna land in your organization, and so to make sure you benefit from it. I think that is about all we have. We don't have any more questions at the moment. So if anybody has any closing remarks they want to provide, you know, now's the time to do it. All right, I'll hand it over to you, Christina.
Okay, well, I thought this was a really fascinating discussion, a lot of information. I think people need to digest it. So this concludes today's webinar entitled Expanding into the United States, IRA and CHIPS, Challenges and Opportunities. Hopefully, this discussion answered some of your questions. The recording of the program will be made available on EACC's YouTube channel, and you will also receive the link by email from me, along with some of the materials of the program. Many thanks to Ella Esquinasi, Mila Kasulke, Joe Kulenovic, Michelle Sadeghi, and our moderator, Peter Stratos, for sharing your invaluable expertise, insights, and practical tips on challenges and opportunities afforded by the Inflation Reduction Act and CHIPS Act for companies considering expanding into the US. So in addition to Enterprise Florida, if you are interested in opportunities here, of course, the European American Chamber of Commerce, Florida, could also be one of your partners. So now to conclude this, I would also like to thank Lisa Wong-Lee and her team at Kaufman Rawson, who worked behind the scenes to ensure that this webinar was technically flawless. And many thanks to Kaufman Rawson for hosting it. And many thanks to you, our audience, for joining us today from all over Europe and the United States. Goodbye.